This is the Novablast 5, and once again, they're changing the midsole foam. This year, the Novablast will feature FF Blast Max, a foam that is lighter than the foam in last year's Novablast. But with the trend of super foams making their way into daily trainers, will FF Blast Max be enough for ASICS to keep up? It's time to lace up the Novablast 5 and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys all about the ASICS Novablast 5. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that ASICS sent to me for the purpose of review, so I did not have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their shoe in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Novablast 5, and let's start with the specs. This is a 41.5 millimeter stack height shoe with an 8 millimeter drop, giving us 33.5 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot. I believe those are the same specs as last year as far as stack height and drop. Now the women do get a different stack height. The drop stays the same, but they're a millimeter lower in the heel and in the forefoot. And the big story for this year is the upgrade of the Novablast to FF Blast Max. This is a brand new foam that is supposed to provide a more responsive bounce according to ASICS, and it's also supposed to be lighter. So even though these two shoes, the Novablast 4 and the Novablast 5, look very similar, and if anything, it looks to me like the Novablast 5 has a little bit more foam to it, the Novablast 5 does come in a little bit lighter. Now on the outsole on this shoe, there is a very familiar kind of pattern of rubber that's on here. It is slightly different than what we saw in last year's version 4, but we're getting the same rubber compound and we're basically getting it in the same areas and to the same depth. So the rubber is still a little bit on the thick side if you ask me. Moving to the upper, we have a brand new upper material as well. This year the Novablast goes to a Checkered mesh. It's a double layer mesh that is very stretchy and also very breathable. It also feels a little bit thinner than the material that we saw in the Novablast 4. Something that isn't thinner though, and something that I think unfortunately isn't thinner, is that the tongue is still kind of on the puffy side, and I feel like as the years have gone on, the tongue on the Novablast has gotten puffier and puffier, even though I'm really wishing they would just take the knit tongue from the Nimbus series and put that into a Novablast. I think that would be really fun to run in. And in the heel cup of this shoe, we're still seeing that same overly padded puffy foam. It makes for a very comfortable slip-in experience when your foot goes into the shoe, and wearing it around casually, it is really nice. But I feel like for running, especially in hot days, it's not really that hot here in Crystal Lake anymore, but on hot days, that's definitely going to be a bit of a sweat collector, as the Novablast has been pretty consistently in the heel for the past couple of years. We do still retain the pull tab though for easy on in the shoes, and overall this shoe comes in at an updated weight of 255 grams or just at 9 ounces. Now that we talked about what this shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. The Novablast 5 is a faithful successor to the Novablast lineage. There's a great amount of cushion in this shoe, and there's a great amount of bounce. I feel like it also picks up the pace as well. So not only can it do your daily training run and handle those run-of-the-mill everyday runs that you're doing most of the week, most of the time, but if you've got a light workout, like a fartlek or an up-tempo run, or maybe you just got an easy run with some strides in it, the Novablast 5 is going to be really fun and really comfortable for you to be able to put those miles in. Now, I think that the word that a lot of you guys who have been watching me review the Novablast for the last 5 iterations are probably looking for is whether it's chaotic. And I will say that the Novablast 5 isn't chaotic. It's more like the Novablast 4 than it is like the Novablast 3, but I do think that the FF Blast Max foam is doing a really good job of kind of giving me more Novablast 3-ish sensation without it feeling chaotic. So I feel like it kind of splits the difference between the Novablast 3 and the Novablast 4 fans. And so it's not as potentially unstable to as many people, but it's still a lot of fun to be able to run in. The upper on the shoe is really comfortable, even more comfortable than the Novablast was last year. And I think because the material is thinner, it does feel like there's a little bit more room and it's a little bit more forgiving in terms of fit in the forefoot. So those of you who are kind of on the bubble between sizes last year because it might have been a little bit too snug for you, I think you might be able to stay at your regular size for the Novablast 5. I do feel like overall the upper is a big improvement over last year, although I would love to see the tongue stop being so overbuilt and the heel cup being so overly padded. As far as the outsole goes, I feel like we have a very similar setup. It's the same compound and arranged in pretty much the same pattern and thickness as it was last year. So if you've been able to run in the Novablast 4 without any traction or grip issues, you should be definitely fine in the Novablast 5. Personally, I feel like I could go with a little bit less rubber because I feel like it would further enhance the experience you're getting from the FF Blast Max. I think as it is, the amount of rubber that's on the outsole is muting the experience just a little bit. That being said, I think the Novablast 5 is a set it and forget it kind of shoe. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I can run in it all day long, and it's an excellent example of a daily trainer. Before we close out the video, let's zoom out and see where the Novablast 5 sits within a broader ASICS lineup. Now, whenever I take a look at a running shoe brand, I like to start with the daily trainer, and that's exactly what a Novablast is. It's the shoe that sits in the middle of your running shoe rotation. It's kind of the base of it all, the shoe that you're running in most often. It's built to be comfortable enough to be used multiple times per week and also be durable enough to handle that kind of mileage. And then for racing, the carbon plated shoe that I like from ASICS is the Metaspeed Sky, and this is the Metaspeed Sky Paris. That's gonna go over here. Now, in between these two shoes, for something that is maybe a little bit faster than you might want for every day, but maybe not quite as special that you'd have to break out your racing shoes, that's where a training companion or session shoe like the Magic Speed 4 comes into play. It's got a little bit of daily training features. It's got a little bit of race day features built in. Now, for days where you're going to be spending a lot of time on feet, maybe it's a recovery run and you want to be a little bit nicer to your body, that's where a shoe like the Glide Ride Max comes into play. It's a little bit more cushioned, a little bit more chill, and it has a lot more comfort features built into it. It's also the first shoe that we saw that introduced at least a little bit of FF Blast Max foam in here. And then from ASICS, there's also a fifth shoe that kind of is a category straddler, but this is the Super Blast 2. This has racing foam in it, FF Turbo Plus, the same Turbo Plus that's in the race day shoe, but it's in a really tall stack height and it has no carbon fiber plate. It also has a little bit of daily training foam on the bottom to help with longevity and also to stabilize this foam. This is a shoe that some people use as a kind of long, slow distance kind of shoe or a recovery day shoe, and it does a good job of that, but I kind of like it for longer runs where I might have to pick up the pace a little bit, and having that super foam is a nice little touch. So this is like a 5 shoe rotation from ASICS that I think could be really fun, but I'm not recommending that people go out and buy all 5 of these shoes. In fact, there's a lot of ways that I think that kind of like this can be pared down. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove 2 shoes from this. And I feel like if I wanted to go with a 3 shoe rotation from ASICS, I'd get rid of the Glide Ride Max and the Magic Speed 4. Not that they're not good shoes, but I just feel like if we're trying to consolidate a little bit, this is a really good way to consolidate here. Use your Novablast for your everyday, your Super Blast 2 for your long runs and long run workouts, and then for your fastest stuff, that's where you reach for the race day shoe. Now, if I were to really push it and force myself to have only 2 ASICS shoes in a rotation, I think the shoe that I would remove would be the Novablast 5. Not that I don't love that shoe, but I feel like the Super Blast 2 is pretty versatile. It can handle everyday running, and it can also do some workouts as well. And then you've got the Metaspeed Sky Paris as your race day option. And I feel like this could be an expensive but doable 2 shoe rotation, because keep in mind the Super Blast 2 is $200. Now, you might be asking, well, what about the other marathon racing shoe that ASICS has? And that is the Metaspeed Edge Paris. And I feel like this is an either or, whether you're using a 2 shoe, 3 shoe, 5 shoe rotation, you're probably either going to like the Metaspeed Edge Paris or the Metaspeed Sky Paris. I kind of use them in the same rotation because I happen to have both of them, but realistically for most runners, it's going to be an either or, and I prefer the Metaspeed Sky. Now let's wrap up the video by going over the buying guide, and we'll talk about some alternatives that you'll want to consider. The Novablast 5 is an excellent example of a daily trainer. It can do a little bit of everything from recovery runs, your everyday runs, to moderate workouts and strides. This shoe goes on sale soon, December 1st, at a price of $140, so inflation has not hit the Novablast series yet. But because the Novablast has been around for a while, there are also some other options to consider in the Novablast family. For example, you can get $10 discount right now on the Novablast 4, and in some very select sizes, you can find the Novablast 3 still around for $100. So those are some other options that you might want to also consider, because while there are some differences between these shoes amongst the Novablast fanatics, for most people, getting an earlier version of Novablast to save you a couple of bucks is definitely something that is a viable option. But there's also a lot of heat coming from other brands in 24 and into 25, so let's take a look at some of those. I think the biggest competition that the Novablast 5 faces is from Adidas, and that's going to be the Evo SL. This is a shoe that has all racing super foam in the midsole, the same Light Strike Pro that was in the Adios Pro 3, but it doesn't have a carbon fiber plate or those energy rods that the Adios Pro series has had. The upper is built more for daily training, but it doesn't have a super puffy tongue or heel cup. And I feel like this shoe is an excellent daily trainer as well, and it does a very good job of even moderate to hard workouts. It'll be interesting to see how this shoe holds up as a daily trainer, as we don't typically associate Light Strike Pro with longevity and durability that you'll need for daily training. But if it could even come kind of close to the kinds of numbers in terms of miles that you can run in this shoe before it uses its usable life, I think this is going to be an incredibly difficult shoe for any brand to compete against in 2025. And it's only $10 more than the Novablast 5. The Evo SL comes in at $150, which I believe is a very aggressive price. Now, there are trickle drops here and there where you might be able to get this shoe now, but supplies are very limited in each of those little mini drops. The broader release doesn't happen until March of 2025, which for me, or depending on how much you run, might be plenty of time to pick up a Novablast 5 and then pick up an Evo SL. But if you're only going to get one of those two shoes, and I feel like people watching this channel regularly are probably not going to only get one of these two shoes, but if you're only going to get one and you're deciding between the Evo SL and the Novablast 5, and you can wait till March of 2025, I'd probably pick the Evo SL. Now, the other shoe that I want to take a look at is another shoe that uses super foam, and I'll use super foam in air quotes here because it's ZoomX in the Pegasus Plus. And I'm using air quotes with this because I don't really think, and I haven't heard officially from Nike one way or the other, but I don't think that the ZoomX foam that's in the Pegasus Plus is the same ZoomX foam that we're seeing in the actual race product, like in the Alphafly 3 or in the Vaporfly. But it is a really good daily training foam, and a lot of the same things that I would say nicely about the Novablast 5, I can kind of copy paste and put onto the Pegasus Plus as well. It's a really great daily trainer. You could take it for some moderate workouts. I do feel though that the Pegasus Plus has a little bit more of an aggressive geometry with a 10mm drop versus the Novablast 8. And I do feel like there is slightly less foam that you're standing on in the shoe in terms of what it feels like underfoot. So it feels like it's a little bit less cushioned, and it is a little bit more snug in the forefoot. And the Pegasus Plus comes in at a substantial premium of $180. So while the Pegasus Plus is one of my favorite daily trainers for 2024, I definitely would pick the Novablast 5. So do I think that going into 2025, that daily trainers absolutely have to have super foams as table stakes in order to be competitive? I think the answer is no. And I think that the FF Blast Max and the Novablast 5 are really good examples of that. But I do think that as we go, and as that trend of putting super foams into daily trainers continues, what you're doing with those foams is going to have to be pretty special in order to keep up. If you have any other questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I mentioned today, feel free to put them in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to talk to you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?